that had ruled the galaxy for 3,000 years. They were giant reptile creatures, standing almost 8 feet tall with thick armored scales covering their bodies. Their scales were so strong that even plasma weapons could not easily break through them. They had claws that could tear through metal doors like paper. They had teeth like knives. They were the most feared creatures in all of known space. Their home planet Prime was a nightmare world. The gravity was crushing. The air was filled with poisonous gases. Giant predators roamed every corner of the land. Volcanoes erupted without warning. Storms that could level mountains swept across the surface every few days. On this terrible world that had evolved to become the ultimate survivors, only the strongest lived long enough to have children. Only the avoided being eaten by something bigger and meaner. When the first built ships and traveled to the stars, they expected to find other species like themselves. They expected competition. They expected a fight. What they found instead shocked them completely. Every other intelligent species in the galaxy was soft, weak, fragile. There were beings made of living crystal. They were beautiful to look at, with light dancing through their transparent bodies. But they shattered if you hit them too hard. Their home world was a peaceful place with gentle weather and no predators at all. There were creatures of water. They looked like a mix between fish and jellyfish, with translucent skin and graceful movements. They were smart and creative, but their bodies were delicate. They needed special suits filled with water just to survive outside their ocean world. There were insect-like beings with hard shells and many legs. They worked together in huge groups and built impressive structures, but individually they were small and easily crushed. None of these species had evolved on dangerous worlds. None of them had fought for survival every single day of their existence. None of them understood what it meant to be a predator. They conquered them all. It was not even difficult. The other species had weapons, yes, but they did not have the will to use them properly. They surrendered quickly. They begged for mercy. They accepted their new place as subjects of the Dominion. For 3,000 years, this was simply how things were. They ruled. Everyone else obeyed. It was the natural order of the universe. The strong dominated the weak. The predators controlled the prey. Admiral was one of the most respected commanders in the fleet. He had served for over 200 years, leading countless campaigns against rebel systems and disobedient colonies. His scales bore the scars of 100 battles. His eyes held the cold confidence of someone who had never truly been challenged. He stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Dominance, watching the stars drift by on the main. His second-in-command, a female named, worked at a console nearby. She was smaller than but just as deadly. Her claws had ended many lives. The fleet had just finished dealing with a colony that had tried to refuse tribute. The aquatic creatures had begged and pleaded, their bodies flashing with distress colors, had been merciful. He had made their end quick. There was no point in cruelty. The universe was harsh enough without adding unnecessary suffering. Looked up from her console. Her scales shifted from dark green to a lighter shade, a sign of surprise among. Admiral, our long-range sensors have detected something strange, she reported. An unknown vessel in the outer rim. It is using technology we have never seen before. Turned to face her. This was unexpected. In 3,000 years, they had found in every spacefaring species in the galaxy. There should be no unknowns left. Show me, he commanded. The main screen changed to display an image of a ship. It was a strange design, angular and practical looking. It lacked the organic curves that ships had. It was not made of crystal like vessels. It was simple, functional, and somehow unsettling. Strange symbols were painted on its hull, along with words that the translator was still working to decode. After a moment, the translation appeared on screen. USS Endeavour. We have analyzed their communications, continued. They call themselves humans. They come from a planet called Earth, in an uncharted region of space far from Concordance territory. We have attempted to contact them." "And how did they respond?" asked. Paused, her scales flickering with an emotion that could not quite identify. "They were polite, Admiral. Friendly, even. They asked if we could direct them to the nearest inhabited system. They said they were explorers, looking for new friends among the stars." Laughed. It was a deep, rumbling sound that echoed across the bridge. New friends. How adorable, how naive. These humans had no idea what they had stumbled into. "Set an intercept course," he ordered. "Maximum speed. I want to meet these humans myself." "Should I alert the fleet to prepare for combat?" asked. Considered the question. The human ship was small, much smaller than even the escort vessels in his fleet. It posed no real threat, but there was something about it that bothered him, something he could not quite explain. Perhaps it was the confident way the humans had responded to contact with an unknown alien species. Most new species panicked when they realized they were not alone in the universe. These humans had simply asked for directions. "Have the fleet maintain combat readiness," he decided. "But do not charge weapons unless I give the order. I am curious about these creatures. Let us learn what we can before we decide their fate." The Dominance turned toward the distant human ship, its massive engines burning bright against the darkness of space. Behind it, 19 other warships followed in perfect formation. It was enough firepower to destroy a small moon. As they traveled, found himself thinking about the humans. Where had they come from? How had they developed space travel without being discovered by scouts? And why were they so calm? Every other species the had encountered showed fear when they realized what they were dealing with. The had trembled. The had tried to flee. The had immediately begun calculating the odds of survival. But these humans had just asked for directions, as if meeting giant armored reptiles from another world was perfectly normal. It was strange, it was wrong, and it made very, very curious. He did not know it yet, but his entire understanding of the universe was about to change. They had spent 3,000 years believing they were special. They were the only. They were the ultimate predators. They were wrong. Captain Daniel Brooks had been in space for 20 years. He had seen strange things, beautiful things, terrifying things, but nothing in his experience had prepared him for the sight of 20 alien warships appearing out of nowhere directly in front of his vessel. The Endeavor was a good ship, one of the best Earth had ever built. It carried 200 crew members, advanced sensors, and enough weapons to handle most problems. But looking at the alien fleet on his, Brooks knew that his ship would not last 5 minutes in a real fight. The lead alien vessel was enormous. It was dark and angular, covered with what looked like weapons ports. It was easily 10 times the size of the Endeavor. The other ships in the formation were smaller but still much larger than anything Earth had ever produced. "All hands battle stations," Brooks said calmly. His voice did not shake. His hands did not tremble. He had faced death before. If this was going to be his last day, he would meet it standing tall. Around him, his bridge crew moved to their positions with practiced ease. There was no panic, no shouting, no chaos. They had trained for moments like this. They were ready. Lieutenant Commander Maria Santos, his second in command, studied her console with intense focus. She was a small woman with dark hair and sharp eyes. Brooks had served with her for 10 years and trusted her completely. "They are hailing us, Captain," she reported. "The universal translator is having some trouble with their language, but I think I can get us something useful." "Put it on screen," Brooks ordered. The flickered, and then Brooks was looking at something from a nightmare. The alien was huge, easily 8 feet tall, with thick scales covering its entire body. Its eyes were yellow with vertical pupils like a snake. Its mouth was filled with rows of sharp teeth. It looked like a dinosaur that had learned to build spaceships. "I am Admiral of the Dominion," the creature announced. Its voice was deep and rumbling, translated into English by the computer systems. "Your vessel has entered concordant space. You will power down your weapons. You will surrender your ship. You will submit to integration into the Dominion." Brooks raised an eyebrow. Beside him, he heard Santos make a small sound that might have been a laugh. "Resistance is not advised," continued. We are the apex predators of this galaxy. We were forged on a while lesser species cowered in their garden worlds. You cannot possibly understand what you face." Brooks took a moment to consider his response. The alien clearly expected him to be afraid. It expected him to surrender, to beg, to submit. That told Brooks something important about the galaxy they had stumbled into. It was ruled by bullies, by creatures who had never met anyone willing to stand up to them. Well, they were about to get an education. "Admiral," Brooks said, keeping his voice pleasant and friendly, "thank you for the warm welcome. I am Captain Daniel Brooks of the United Earth Space Command vessel Endeavor. We are on a peaceful exploration mission and mean you no harm." He paused for a moment, letting the silence stretch. "However, I should mention that we will not be surrendering our ship." Scales shifted color slightly. Brooks did not know what that meant, but he suspected it was surprise. The alien had probably never had anyone refuse him before. "You do not understand," human said slowly. "Look upon us. We are larger than you. We are stronger than you. We are more numerous than you. Our empire spans 1,000 systems. What possible chance do you think you have?" Brooks leaned back in his chair. He smiled. It was not a particularly friendly smile. "Well, Admiral, since you mentioned, I think there is something you should know about Earth." He nodded to Santos, who began transmitting a data package to the alien ship. It contained basic information about humanity's home planet, geological surveys, atmospheric data, information about Earth's wildlife, a brief summary of human evolutionary history. On the expression changed as he reviewed the data. His scales went from dark green to a much paler shade. His eyes widened. His mouth opened slightly, revealing even more of those terrifying teeth. "This cannot be accurate," he said. His voice had lost some of its commanding tone. "Your world has active supervolcanoes, massive earthquakes. Your atmosphere contains a highly reactive gas that would poison most life forms." "Oxygen," Brooks confirmed. "Yes, we breathe it. We actually need it to survive." "You have apex predators in every environment: land, sea, air. Your evolutionary records show 5 mass extinction events that killed most life on your planet, and yet your species survived all of them. 6, actually, if you count the one we almost caused ourselves," Santos added helpfully. "But we fixed that one." Stared at the data as if it had personally betrayed him. "Your species evolved from pursuit predators, creatures that did not ambush their prey or overpower it with strength. You simply chased it, for hours, for days, until it collapsed from exhaustion and you walked up and killed it. Persistence hunting," Brooks said. "It is very effective. You regularly consume substances that would be lethal to other species. Caffeine, alcohol, capsaicin." His voice was getting higher. "You eat neurotoxins for enjoyment." "Spicy food is delicious," Brooks agreed. "You form emotional bonds with dangerous predator species and keep them in your homes as companions. Dogs are very loyal." Set down his data pad. His scales had gone almost white. When he spoke again, his voice was quiet. "You are Category 10, according to your own classification system," Santos said. "We checked your databases. Earth scores higher than Prime on almost every metric." The bridge of the dominance had gone completely silent. Brooks could see other in the background, all of them staring at their screens with expressions of shock and disbelief. For 3,000 years, they had believed they were unique. They were the only species forged in the fires of a. They were the ultimate predators, the apex of evolution, the rightful rulers of the galaxy. And now they had just discovered that somewhere in the unexplored reaches of space, there was a planet even more dangerous than their own. a planet that had produced a species even more terrifying than themselves. "I think," said slowly, "that we need to talk." Brooks smiled. "I think you might be right." Admiral needed to see the humans with his own eyes. Reading data on a screen was one thing. Meeting them face to face was something else entirely. He had to know if the information was real. He had to understand what kind of creatures could evolve on a world even more dangerous than Prime. Captain Brooks agreed to meet at an old abandoned trading station in a nearby star system. It was neutral ground, a place where neither side would have an advantage. Brought 20 of his finest warriors with him. They were all veterans, all killers, all ready to fight at a moment's notice. When the human shuttle docked at the station, and his soldiers were already waiting in the main meeting chamber, they had positioned themselves to control all the exits. They were armed with the best weapons the Dominion could provide. The door opened. 5 humans walked in. Stared at them. They were so small. The tallest one, the one called Captain Brooks, was barely 6 feet tall. His body looked soft and fragile compared to scales. He wore a simple uniform with almost no armor. He carried a small weapon on his hip that looked like a toy compared to plasma rifles. And yet he walked into a room full of armed warriors, as if he were taking a pleasant stroll through a garden. The other humans followed behind him with the same casual confidence. There was Lieutenant Commander Santos, a small woman with dark hair. There were 3 others whose names did not yet know. None of them looked worried. None of them showed any sign of fear. Brooks walked directly up to and extended his hand. Had researched this gesture. It was a human greeting, a way of showing that you meant no harm. Took the offered hand. He was surprised by how strong the human's grip was. He was also surprised by something else. "Your skin is very warm," observed. "Is this normal for your species?" "About 98 degrees Fahrenheit," Brooks confirmed. "We are endothermic, warm-blooded. Our bodies generate their own heat. It lets us function in a wide range of environments." Filed this information away. Were cold-blooded. They needed external heat sources to maintain their body temperature. In cold environments, they became slow and sluggish, but humans could apparently function normally regardless of the temperature around them. They sat down at a large table, humans on one side and on the other, had prepared many questions. His scientists were desperate for information about this new species. He decided to start with the thing that confused him most. "Your historical records indicate that your species has fought many wars against itself," he said. "Conflicts that killed millions of your own kind, and yet your civilization is still standing. How is this possible?" Brooks thought about the question before answering. "Humans are complicated creatures, Admiral. We are capable of great violence, yes, but we are also capable of great compassion. We fight each other, but we also cooperate with each other. We destroy, but we also build. Our wars have been terrible, but they have also pushed us to become better, to develop new ideas and new systems that prevent future conflicts." "Your Second World War," said, looking at his notes. 60 million of your people died, and yet within one generation, the countries that had been trying to destroy each other became allies, former enemies working together. How is this possible?" One of the other humans spoke up. Her name was, and she served as a tactical officer on the Endeavor. She was small even by human standards, with kind eyes and a gentle voice, but had read her service record. She had been decorated multiple times for bravery in combat. "Forgiveness," she said simply. "It is one of our most important traits. Humans can hate very deeply, but we can also choose to move past that hate. We can decide that the future matters more than the past." Struggled to understand this. Culture was built on honor and revenge. Insults were remembered for generations. The idea of forgiving a mortal enemy was almost physically painful to consider. "Tell me about your biology," he said, changing the subject. "Our medical officers are disturbed by what they have learned." Brooks smiled slightly. What would you like to know? Your immune system, how does it work? We carry trillions of microorganisms in and on our bodies, Brooks explained. Bacteria, viruses, fungi, most of them are helpful. They help us digest food, fight off infections, and regulate our metabolism. We have essentially formed a partnership with creatures that would kill most other species. You are walking biological weapons, said flatly. We prefer to think of ourselves as ecosystems. The conversation continued for hours, learned about human endurance, about how they could run for days without stopping, chasing prey until it collapsed from exhaustion. He learned about adrenaline, the chemical that flooded human bodies during danger and allowed them to perform incredible feats of strength and speed. He learned that human bones grew stronger after being broken, that their immune systems became more powerful with exposure to diseases, that their brains were wired to find patterns and solve problems in ways that other species could not match. But what disturbed most was learning about human psychology. They were pack animals, social creatures who formed deep emotional bonds with each other. They would sacrifice their own lives to protect their friends and family. They felt a powerful urge to defend the weak and fight against injustice. They could love so deeply that it all logic, and they could hate so intensely that it burned for generations. You are not just predators, said slowly. You are something else entirely. What do you mean? Brooks asked. Thought about how to explain it. They had conquered the galaxy because they were bigger and stronger than everyone else. They were apex predators, yes, but they were still just predators. They killed to eat. They fought to survive. They understood the simple mathematics of power. But humans were different. They did not just survive on there. They thrived. They built civilizations in every environment their planet could offer. They conquered their world not through strength alone, but through cooperation, creativity, and sheer stubborn refusal to give up. You are survivors, said finally. Not just predators, survivors. There is a difference. Brooks nodded slowly. I think I understand what you mean. They have ruled this galaxy for 3,000 years because we were the most dangerous things in it, continued. But I am beginning to think that we may have met something even more dangerous. We do not have to be enemies, Brooks said. Humans are not looking to conquer anyone. We just want to explore, to learn, to make friends. Laughed, but there was no humor in it. You say that now, but what happens when someone threatens your friends? What happens when someone attacks your home? What happens when someone hurts the people you love? Brooks did not answer. He did not need to. The look in his eyes said everything. Had seen that look before. He had seen it in the eyes of cornered animals, in the eyes of soldiers making their last stand, in the eyes of parents protecting their children. It was the look of something that would never stop fighting, never surrender, never forgive. For the first time in his very long life, Admiral felt something he had never felt before. He felt afraid. News about the humans spread across the galaxy like fire through dry grass. For 3,000 years, the other species of the galactic concordance had accepted rule as the natural order of things. They were simply better than everyone else. Fighting back was pointless. Resistance only led to pain and death. But now everything had changed. There was another species out there, a species that had refused to surrender to a species that was, according to the reports, even more dangerous than themselves. They were the first to reach out. They sent their most senior diplomat, a being called Prism of Morning Light, to request a meeting with the humans. Captain Brooks agreed, and soon the Endeavor was hosting visitors from dozens of different species. Prism was beautiful in a strange way. Their body was made of living crystal that caught and reflected light in 1,000 different colors. They communicated through patterns of light and sound that the universal translator converted to speech. We have studied your history, Prism said to the gathered humans. It is both inspiring and terrifying. Your species has suffered so much. Wars, plagues, natural disasters. And yet you keep going, you keep building, you keep hopping. How do you do it? Lieutenant Commander Santos answered the question. Because giving up is not in our nature. Humans are stubborn. We fall down, we get back up. We fail, we try again. Sometimes it is not pretty. Sometimes it is not noble. Sometimes we just refuse to quit because we are too stubborn to know when to stop. A delegate spoke next. They floated in a water-filled suit that allowed them to survive outside their ocean environment. Their body was translucent, and their voice was soft and musical. They have ruled us for 3,000 years. We accepted their rule because we believed there was no other choice. But you humans refused to submit. Why? Brooks leaned forward in his chair. On Earth, we have a concept called freedom. It is the idea that every thinking being has the right to choose their own path. To be ruled by force is to be a slave. And humans have fought and died for thousands of years to end slavery wherever we find it. But they are stronger than you, they protested. Their ships are more powerful. Their armies are larger. How can you hope to win against them? We are working on that, Brooks admitted. But in the meantime, we have something that they do not understand. We have each other. Humans are most dangerous when we are protecting someone we care about. Threaten a human's family or friends, and you will face something terrible. Before the discussion could continue, an alarm sounded throughout the ship. Santos checked her console and her face went pale. Captain Fleet incoming, 20 warships. They just dropped out of faster-than-light travel. Admiral's flagship is leading them. Brooks stood up slowly. Around him, his crew moved to battle stations with calm efficiency. None of them panicked. None of them ran. They simply prepared to fight. The activated showing Admiral's face. The look troubled. His scales were shifting through several different colors, a sign of emotional conflict. Captain Brooks said, I have received new orders from the Dominion High Command. Your species has been declared a threat to galactic stability. You are to be neutralized. The alien delegates in the room made sounds of distress. They flickered with frightened colors. They retreated to the back of the chamber. But the humans did not move. They stood their ground, weapons ready, faces calm. Admiral, Brooks said quietly, I am going to give you one chance to reconsider. One chance to turn your fleet around and leave. Because if you fire on this ship, if you hurt any member of my crew, you will not be starting a war with the Endeavor. You will be starting a war with Earth, with 8 billion humans who will not stop, will not surrender, and will not forgive. You are one ship, pointed out. We are 20. For now, Brooks agreed. But you have seen our history, Admiral. You know what happens when humans go to war. We do not fight for territory or resources. We fight for ideas, for principles, for each other. And we never, ever give up. Silence stretched between them. The fleet hung in space, weapons charged, waiting for the order to fire. The Endeavor was tiny compared to even the smallest warship. If the battle began, it would be over in minutes. But did not give the order. He thought about everything he had learned about humans, their stubborn refusal to accept defeat, their ability to cooperate and work together against impossible odds, their willingness to sacrifice everything for the people they loved. He thought about what would happen if the Dominion actually went to war with Earth. The humans would lose at first. They were outnumbered, but they would not stay beaten. They would learn. They would adapt. They would find weaknesses in strategy and exploit them. They would build new weapons and new ships. They would recruit allies from among the other species of the galaxy. And they would never stop fighting, not until they were destroyed or the humans were completely extinct. There would be no surrender, no negotiated peace, just endless war until one side was erased from the universe. The Dominion might win such a war, but at what cost? How many would die? How many worlds would burn? And what kind of galaxy would be left at the end? Made his decision. The High Command will not be pleased, he said slowly. The High Command is not here, Brooks replied. You are, and I think you understand what is at stake." Was quiet for a long moment. Then slowly he began to laugh. "You know something, Captain. In 3,000 years of conquest, I have never met a species quite like yours. You are absolutely insane. We prefer to call it optimistic." "It is the same thing," shook his head. "Very well, we will withdraw, but this is not over. The High Command will send others, larger fleets, more determined commanders." "And we will be ready," Brooks said. "But in the meantime, Admiral, perhaps we could discuss a different kind of arrangement, one that does not involve conquest or surrender." Tilted his head. "What do you have in mind? How would you like to meet more humans?" The alien delegates watched in amazement as the two commanders began to talk, not about war or conquest or submission, but about cooperation, about alliance, about the possibility of a galaxy where strength did not automatically mean cruelty. It was the beginning of something new, something that had never existed before in 3,000 years of dominance. It was the beginning of hope. 5 years had passed since the first meeting between humans and, in that time, the galaxy had changed in ways that nobody could have predicted. The alliance between Earth and the Dominion had shocked everyone. Many had protested, many humans had doubted, but Admiral had become an unexpected champion of the new order. He traveled from world to world, telling the story of his encounter with humanity. He explained that they had been wrong about what it meant to be a survival on a harsh world did not have to mean cruelty and conquest. It could also mean cooperation and compassion. Captain Daniel Brooks, now Admiral Brooks, stood on the bridge of his new flagship. It was called the Unity, and it was a joint creation of human and engineers. The ship combined the best technologies of both species. It was powerful and elegant and represented everything that the new alliance stood for. The crew was equally mixed, humans, and worked side by side at their stations. They had learned to trust each other. They had learned to be friends. It had not been easy. There had been misunderstandings and arguments and moments of tension, but they had worked through all of it. Looking around his bridge, Brooks felt a deep sense of pride. 5 years ago, this would have been impossible. 5 years ago, humans and would have been trying to kill each other. Now they were building a new future together. Not everyone had accepted the changes, of course. The High Command had split into factions. Some supported the alliance with humanity. Others wanted to return to the old ways of conquest and dominance. There had been battles and betrayals. Good people had died on both sides. But the alliance had survived. It had grown stronger with each challenge. Maria Santos, now Captain Santos with her own ship, had become the face of human diplomacy in the outer regions of the galaxy. She had a gift for connecting with other species. Under her guidance, the N had begun to see themselves as equal partners in galactic affairs. They were no longer content to be ruled by others. That had surprised everyone the most. The insect-like beings had always been dismissed as simple workers, good for manual labor but not much else. But they had watched the humans carefully. They had studied human ideas about government and individual rights, and then they had asked for human teachers. Within 2 years, they had transformed their entire society. They had changed from a hive monarchy where one queen made all decisions to a representative republic where every had a voice. It was a peaceful revolution, accomplished without a single death. Change was happening everywhere. Old enemies were becoming friends. Old wounds were slowly healing. The galaxy that had been frozen in fear for 3,000 years was finally beginning to move forward. Admiral Brooks stood at the viewport of the Unity, watching the stars drift by. Earth was far behind him now, but its influence reached further every day. Human colonies were spreading across the galaxy. Trade routes connected species that had never spoken to each other before. Cultural exchanges brought new ideas and new perspectives to every corner of known space. A young officer approached him. Her name was, and she belonged to the new generation that had grown up knowing humans as allies rather than enemies. She served as the tactical officer on the Unity. "Admiral," she said, "we have received a message from the Unity Council. They are asking if you will speak at tomorrow's assembly." Brooks nodded. The Unity Council was the new governing body of the Galactic Alliance. It had representatives from every member species. They met at a massive space station built in neutral territory. The station itself was a symbol of how much things had changed. "What do they want me to talk about?" he asked. Hesitated for a moment. "They want you to speak about Earth, about what it means to be a. There are still many who fear humanity. They worry that humans will eventually become what the once were." Brooks understood the concern. Power could corrupt anyone. Humans had proven many times throughout their history that they were capable of terrible things. The same traits that made them survivors could also make them tyrants. "Tell them I will speak," he said. "And tell them not to worry. We know what we are. We have faced our own darkness. We have made terrible mistakes, but we have also chosen to learn from those mistakes. That is what being human means. Not perfection, not invincibility, just the choice every single day to be better than we were yesterday." Nodded and went to send the message. Brooks turned back to the viewport. Somewhere out there, in the vast unknown regions of space, there were other species still waiting to be discovered. Some would be friendly. Some would be hostile. Some would be so strange that understanding them would seem impossible at first. But that was fine. Impossible was just another word for something that had not been done yet. Humanity had crawled out of the mud millions of years ago. They had survived ice ages and plagues and wars. They had survived their own worst impulses. They had reached for the stars and found that they were not alone. They had met other and taught them that strength could mean protection instead of oppression. They had shown fragile species that survival was possible even in the harshest conditions. They had changed the galaxy simply by being themselves. And they were just getting started. Brooks smiled as he watched the stars. It was the expression of a man who had seen the worst of his species and still believed in the best. "Helm," he said, "set a course for the Unity Station. We have a speech to prepare." The great ship turned toward its destination, carrying its crew of humans and soldiers and scientists, friends who had once been enemies. Behind them, the galaxy continued to spin, full of dangers and wonders and endless possibilities. And somewhere, on countless worlds scattered across the stars, children of a dozen different species looked up at the night sky and dreamed of what they might become. Because that was what the humans had given them. They had given them hope. And hope, as it turned out, was the most powerful force in the universe. The end.